The Galactic Council chamber was bigger than any stadium on Earth. It floated in space, a massive sphere made of crystal and metal, where the most powerful species in the galaxy came to make decisions. Today, something bad was about to happen. Luke Harrison stood in the center of the chamber. He was Earth's ambassador, just one human among hundreds of alien beings. Some aliens were twice as tall as him, others floated in the air. A few looked like living rocks or clouds of gas. Luke wore a simple black suit and kept his face calm, even though his heart was beating fast. The Krellian delegate stood up. The Krellians were the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They looked like giant insects made of crystal, with 6 arms and eyes that glowed purple. This one was their supreme speaker, and when he talked, everyone listened. "Humans of Earth," the Krellian said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You have something that belongs to us. Your quantum drive technology is too dangerous for such a young species. You will give it to us or we will take it from your dead worlds." Luke stayed quiet. He had expected this. Humans had only been traveling between stars for 300 years. To the Krellians, who had ruled space for 10,000 years, humans were like children playing with fire. Above the chamber, hidden in a cloaked ship, Commander Lisa Grant watched everything through her screens. She commanded the USS Liberty, one of Earth's newest warships. Her crew of 200 humans sat at their stations waiting. They all knew this meeting would decide if humanity would survive or die. "They're really going to do it," her pilot, Jim Baker, said quietly. "They're really going to threaten us with extinction," Lisa nodded. "Let them talk. Luke knows what he's doing." Back in the chamber, the Krellian continued. "We have destroyed 17 species who refuse to obey us. Your sun is fragile. One of our sun-killer weapons could turn it into a black hole. Your colonies are scattered and weak. We could hunt them down one by one. You have 3 of your Earth days to decide." The other aliens in the chamber stayed silent. Many of them hated the Krellians but were too afraid to speak up. The Krellians had the biggest fleet, the best weapons, and no mercy for those who opposed them. Luke finally stepped forward. "May I speak?" The Krellian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "The human wants to beg. Speak, little creature." Luke looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as he could. Then he spoke clearly and slowly. "You say we are young. This is true. You say we are weak. This might be true. You say you will destroy us if we don't give you our technology. This is where you have made a mistake." The chamber became very quiet. No one had ever talked back to the Krellians like this. Luke continued. "You see, humans have a saying. You can take everything from someone, but when you do, they have nothing left to lose. You threaten our children. You threaten our homes. You threaten our future. So I must ask you, are you sure you want to do this?" The Krellian's eyes glowed brighter with anger. "Are you threatening us, human?" "No," Luke said. "I'm educating you. You know our history. We fought wars on our own planet for thousands of years. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. But every time someone tried to wipe us out completely, we became something they didn't expect. We became united. We became creative. We became unstoppable." On the Liberty, Lisa got a message on her private screen. It was from Earth, from President John Carter himself. The message was just one word. "Confirmed." Lisa turned to her crew. "It's happening. Send the signal to all human ships. Operation Sunrise begins now." The Krellian delegate slammed 2 of his arms on his platform. "Enough! You dare to lecture us? We who traveled the stars when your ancestors were living in caves? You have 3 days, human. Use them to say goodbye to your species." Luke smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that humans wore when they had already made a hard decision. "You asked for our technology," Luke said. "Let me tell you what you're really asking for. You're asking to fight a species that turned nuclear weapons on itself and survived. A species that went to its moon using computers less powerful than what our children play games on. A species that can take any tool, any object, any situation and turn it into a weapon." He paused. looking directly at the Krellian. You're asking to fight 8 billion humans on Earth, 2 billion in the colonies, and every single one of them will die before they kneel to you. You're asking to fight our soldiers, yes, but also our farmers who will poison their own crops before you can take them, our workers who will sabotage every machine, our children who will grow up knowing only one purpose: to destroy you. The other delegates began whispering among themselves. Some were shocked, others seemed almost hopeful. Luke raised his voice. You want war with humanity? Then you should know this. We don't fight wars like you do. We don't form neat battle lines. We don't follow ancient rules of combat. We fight dirty, we fight smart, we fight with everything we have, and then we fight with things we make up along the way. The Krellian delegate rose to his full height, towering over Luke. Your words mean nothing. In 3 days you will surrender, or burn. Luke turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. You said you've destroyed 17 species. Did any of them have a saying like this? Give me liberty or give me death? Because every human child learns those words, every single one. As Luke walked out of the chamber, his assistant, Mary Jones, fell into step beside him. She was young, maybe 25, but her eyes were hard. Did we buy enough time, she asked. 3 days is more than enough, Luke said. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late. Back on Earth, President John Carter stood in the emergency command center deep underground. Around him were generals, scientists, and leaders from every nation on Earth. For the first time in human history, there were no arguments, no politics, no divisions. Ladies and gentlemen, Carter said, the Krellians have made their choice. They want to see what humanity is capable of when our survival is at stake. I feel sorry for them. General Paul Adams, head of Earth's combined military forces, stood up. All forces are ready, sir. The colony worlds are armed. The civilian fleet is being converted. Every able-bodied human who can hold a weapon has volunteered. Dr. Helen Chang, Earth's leading scientist, added, the quantum drives are ready for something the Krellians won't expect. We're not just going to fight them. We're going to change how war works. Carter nodded. Send the message to all human worlds. Tell them the Krellians asked for war. Tell them humanity accepts. And tell them we're not fighting to win. We're fighting to make sure no one ever threatens us again. As the message went out, 10 billion humans across the galaxy received the same notification. The aliens had finally pushed too far. They wanted to see humanity's true face. They were about to learn why humans had survived everything the universe had thrown at them. The war hadn't started yet, but in a way it was already over. The Krellians just didn't know it yet. The first day after the Krellian threat, something strange happened on every human world. Factories that made cars started making weapons. Hospitals began training everyone to be combat medics. Even children's toy companies switched their production lines to make drones. The entire human civilization changed in 24 hours. Captain Amy Rodriguez had been hauling cargo between Earth and Mars for 15 years. Her ship, the Rust Bucket, was old and ugly. It leaked air sometimes, and the engines made weird noises. But within 6 hours of the announcement, her ship had been transformed. I can't believe this actually works, her engineer Tom White said as he welded another weapon mount to the hull. We're turning a cargo hauler into a warship. Amy watched her crew work. They were civilians, people who had never fought in their lives. But now they moved with purpose, each one doing their part. Humans are good at making things work when they have to, she said. My grandfather fought in Earth's last war with a rifle held together with tape. He won. Across human space, the same thing was happening. 12,000 ships were being armed. It didn't matter if they were military vessels, cargo ships, passenger liners, or even private yachts. If it could fly in space, humans were putting weapons on it. But the real surprise was hiding in the dark corners of space. For 30 years, Dr. Kevin Liu had been working on a secret project. He called them ghost ships. They were old human vessels, some from the very first days of space travel, floating dead in space. Everyone thought they were junk, debris from humanity's early attempts to reach the stars. Kevin stood in his control room on Luna Base, looking at hundreds of screens. Each screen showed a different ghost ship, "Wake them up," he said to his team. His assistant, Nancy Brown, typed commands into her console. "Activation signal sent, they're coming online now." One by one, the dead ships came to life. Their engines, hidden and maintained by tiny robots for decades, started up. Weapon systems that had been installed in secret powered on. In minutes, humanity's fleet didn't just double. It grew by 5,000 ships that no one knew existed. The Krellians had spies, of course. Every powerful species did. But the reports they were getting didn't make sense. On the Krellian fortress world of Zephon Prime, Defensive Coordinator Krivak stared at his screens in confusion. "This can't be right," he said to his subordinate. "It says humans are attacking 17 of our systems at the same time." "The reports are confirmed, sir," his subordinate replied. "But these aren't just military ships. They're using everything. Mining ships are becoming battering rams. Passenger ships are full of soldiers. They've even weaponized their space stations." Krivax had studied war for 500 years. He had never seen anything like this. "No species can organize this. Fast, it's chaos." "Sir," another officer called out, "we're detecting something strange. Dead human ships throughout the galaxy are moving. They're armed, sir." The Battle of Rigel Station was the first real fight. The Krellians had a base there, defended by 50 warships. The humans sent 200 ships to attack it. But these weren't normal warships. They were a mix of everything. Military vessels, converted cargo ships, armed passenger liners, and even some of the ghost ships. Commander Greg Miller led the attack from his destroyer, the Defiant. "All ships remember the plan. They expect us to fight in formation. We're not going to do that. Everyone fights their own way. Make them chase shadows." The human fleet didn't attack like a military force. They attacked like a swarm of angry bees. Ships came from every direction at different speeds, using different tactics. Some ships would pretend to retreat, then turn and fire. Others rammed straight into Krellian vessels. A few dropped mines and ran away, letting the Krellians run into the traps. On one of the converted passenger ships, Captain Ellen Park had 300 volunteers instead of tourists. They weren't soldiers. They were farmers, teachers, mechanics, anyone who could hold a gun. "Remember," she told them over the intercom, "we're not trying to be heroes. We're trying to be so annoying that they don't know what to do with us." Her ship, which usually carried families on vacation, now carried something else. The swimming pool had been drained and filled with explosive drones. The restaurant had become a medical bay. The casino was now a weapons depot. When they got close to a Krellian cruiser, they launched everything at once. The Krellians were excellent warriors. They had perfect discipline and superior technology. But they had one weakness. They thought in straight lines. They expected enemies to fight with honor, with rules, with predictable patterns. Humans didn't do any of that. Captain Danny Chen commanded one of the ghost ships, a 100-year-old colony vessel that should have been scrap metal. His crew of 50 volunteers had found it floating near Jupiter and brought it back to life in 8 hours. The ship couldn't fight a real battle. So Danny did something else. He broadcast human music at the Krellian fleet. Not just any music, but death metal, played at frequencies that interfered with Krellian communication systems. While the aliens tried to figure out what was happening, Danny's ship got close enough to release magnetic mines that attached to the Krellian hulls like parasites. "This is insane," his navigator, Joe Kim, laughed as they barely avoided being destroyed by return fire. "We're fighting an advanced alien fleet with a ship held together by hope and spite." "And it's working," Danny replied, watching a Krellian destroyer try to shake off the mines. "They prepared for a war. We gave them chaos." Back on Earth, the transformation was complete. Every factory was making weapons or supplies. Every person who could work was helping somehow. Children collected metal for recycling into ammunition. The elderly taught others how to fight based on wars from 100 years ago. Even prisoners were given the choice to fight for humanity's survival. President Carter watched the reports coming in. "How many volunteers do we have now?" General Adams checked his tablet. 7 billion on Earth. Every colony has reported full mobilization. "Sir, we have grandmothers signing up to fly suicide missions." We have teenagers hacking Krellian computers with gaming software. We have corporate executives donating their entire fortunes to build more weapons. Dr. Helen Chang added, "The quantum drive project is ahead of schedule. The Krellians want our technology. We're going to show them something they never imagined." In space, the war was spreading. Human ships appeared everywhere at once. They didn't try to hold territory. They hit hard and disappeared. They used tricks that no civilized species would consider. One group of asteroid miners, led by Captain Ruth Williams, had turned their rock-breaking equipment into weapons. They pushed asteroids into Krellian shipping lanes. They used their mining lasers to cut through enemy hulls. They even filled hollow asteroids with explosives and left them as gifts for the Krellians to find. "We're not soldiers," Ruth told her crew of 30 miners. "But we know how to break things, and right now, that's what humanity needs." The Krellians were starting to realize something was very wrong. They had expected resistance. They had expected humanity to fight back. But they hadn't expected this. Every human seemed to be fighting their own personal war against the Krellians. There was no central command to destroy, no single strategy to counter. On Zephon Prime, Krivax received another report. "Sir, the humans have taken 3 of our supply depots, but the way they did it doesn't make sense. One depot was taken by what appears to be a circus ship. They used trained animals and acrobats to confuse our guards." Krivax closed all 4 of his eyes in frustration. How do we fight an enemy that uses circus performers as soldiers? His subordinate had no answer. None of them did. The Krellians had prepared for war. The humans had given them something else entirely. They had given them the full creative insanity of a species that had nothing left to lose. As the second day ended, humanity had lost 40 ships. The Krellians had lost 300. But more importantly, the Krellians had lost something else: their confidence. For the first time in 10,000 years, they were afraid. The Krellian Military Academy had stood for 8,000 years. Its teachers wrote the books on space warfare that every species studied. They had never lost a major war. But on the third day of fighting humans, they discovered their books were useless. Colonel Jake Murphy stood in the ruins of a Krellian supply depot on the planet Kepler 4M42b. His team of 200 fighters had just taken the depot using tactics that shouldn't have worked. Half his team weren't even soldiers. They were dancers, athletes, video gamers, and street artists. "How did we just win?" asked Private Susan Lee, who had been a gymnastics teacher 6 days ago. Jake smiled, stepping over a confused Krellian guard who was wrapped in cargo netting. "They think in straight lines. We think in jazz. Watch." He pointed to a security recording showing their attack. "See? They expected us to come through the doors. Instead, we came through the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Bobby over there used parkour moves to run along the walls. You did backflips over their defensive positions. Charlie used spray paint to mark targets while pretending to be making art." Bobby, Chen, who had been a street performer in New York, laughed. "I can't believe my stupid human tricks worked on aliens." "That's the thing," Jake explained. "They're not stupid. The Krellians have never seen anyone fight like this because every other species fights the proper way. We fight the human way." Meanwhile, in a laboratory orbiting Mars, Dr. Emma Watson was doing something the entire galaxy thought was impossible. She had taken apart Krellian shield technology and rebuilt it in just 48 hours. But she hadn't copied it. She had completely reimagined it. "The Krellians build shields like walls," she explained to her exhausted team of scientists. "Strong, solid, but rigid. We're going to build them like soap bubbles." Her assistant, Dr. Robert Lee, looked confused. "Soap bubbles? Those are weak." "No, they're flexible," Emma said, bringing up a hologram. "Watch. When something hits a soap bubble, it bends but doesn't break. And if it does pop, the soap just forms a new bubble instantly. The Krellians' shields take 10 seconds to recharge when they're broken. Ours will take 1 millisecond. She had approached the problem like a human. Instead of following the established science that said shields had to work one way, she had asked, what if they didn't? In 2 days, she had revolutionized shield technology by thinking of it like a child's toy. The first test of the new shields happened at the Battle of Nexus Station. Captain Danny Chen was still commanding his ancient colony ship held together by determination and hope. The ship now had Emma's new shields installed, jury-rigged with equipment that shouldn't have worked together. A Krellian dreadnought, a ship 10 times bigger than Danny's, opened fire with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ship's shields popped like bubbles, then reformed instantly. Pop, reform. Pop, reform. The ship shook but survived. "This is impossible." "The Krellian," Captain transmitted. "What technology is this?" Danny's response became legendary across human space. He broadcast death metal at volumes that shook both ships, then transmitted, "It's not technology. It's human stubbornness, with a physics degree." Then Danny did something no sane captain would do. He accelerated to full speed and rammed his ship into the dreadnought. But before impact, his crew had already evacuated in pods that were designed to look like debris. The pods attached to the Krellian hull like parasites, and the humans inside began cutting their way into the enemy ship. "This is crazy," shouted Private Mike Taylor as he used a mining laser to cut through 3 feet of alien metal. "Welcome to human warfare," his squad leader Sergeant Ana Garcia replied. "If it's crazy but it works, it's not crazy." The creativity of human attacks was breaking Krellian morale. On the moon of Titan, a group of human teenagers led by Alex Turner had hacked into Krellian communication networks using modified gaming software. Alex was 17 years old and had never been in a fight in his life, but he had been playing strategy games since he was 5. "Look," Alex explained to his team of young hackers. "The Krellians encrypt their messages like a fortress. Walls upon walls of security. But what if we don't break through? What if we go around?" His friend Katie Zhang caught on immediately. "You mean we make them think their own messages are viruses?" "Exactly. We don't hack their system. We make their system hack itself." Within 3 hours, Krellian fleets were receiving orders that seemed to come from their high command but were actually teenage humans playing the galaxy's most dangerous video game. Ships were sent to wrong coordinates. Supply deliveries went to human forces instead of Krellian ones. One Krellian fleet spent 6 hours attacking empty space because they thought there were cloaked human ships there. The Krellians tried to adapt, but humans were changing tactics faster than they could respond. A group of asteroid miners led by Captain Ruth Williams had turned their mining equipment into planet-cracking weapons. They didn't use them on planets, though. They used them on the Krellians' most precious resource, their pride. Ruth's team carved human faces into asteroids and sent them floating past Krellian bases. They painted human flags on moons. They even used their precision mining lasers to write "humans were here" on the hull of a Krellian battleship while it was still fighting. "We're not just fighting them," Ruth explained to her crew. "We're showing them that we can touch them anywhere, anytime. We're in their heads now." The psychological warfare was working. Krellian soldiers were becoming paranoid. Every piece of debris might be a human trap. Every signal might be fake. Every shadow might hide a human fighter doing something impossible. On Earth, factories were producing weapons that shouldn't exist. Humans were combining technologies in ways that violated what other species thought was possible. They put Krellian shields on bullets. They made bombs that exploded backward in time by 3 seconds, hitting enemies before they were launched. They created viruses that made Krellian computers develop anxiety. Dr. Carl Foster, one of Earth's weapons designers, explained it simply. "The Krellians follow the rules of science. We follow the rules of science too, but we also ask, what if we bent this rule just a little? And then we bent it until it breaks in useful ways." One of the most effective weapons wasn't a weapon at all. It was music. Humans discovered that certain frequencies of music caused Krellian technology to malfunction. So every human ship started broadcasting everything from classical to heavy metal to pop music. The galaxy's most advanced species was being defeated partly by boy bands and symphony orchestras. Captain Lisa Grant, still commanding the USS Liberty, used this to devastating effect during the Battle of Wolf 359. Surrounded by 6 Krellian cruisers, she should have been destroyed. Instead, she broadcast a mixture of opera and electronic dance music at frequencies that caused the Krellian targeting systems to fail. "I'm fighting aliens with Mozart and Deadmau 5, her weapons officer," Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez said in disbelief. This is not how I thought my military career would go. Nothing about this war is normal, Lisa replied. That's why we're winning. The Battle of Wolf 359 ended with all 6 Krellian cruisers disabled, their crews so confused by human tactics that they surrendered just to make the music stop. But the real innovation was happening in how humans organized. Or rather, how they didn't organize. There was no central command giving orders to every ship. Instead, humans were fighting millions of individual wars that somehow added up to one coordinated effort. A coffee shop owner from Seattle commanded a converted yacht and invented a way to use coffee grounds as explosive material. A group of artists from Paris used holographic projectors to create fake human fleets that distracted Krellian forces. Even a monastery from Tibet had joined the war, with monks using meditation techniques to remain hidden from Krellian sensors while planting surveillance equipment. The Krellians, who had spent millennia perfecting the art of organized warfare, couldn't understand it. How could chaos be more effective than order? How could amateurs defeat professionals? How could a species that had only been in space for 3 centuries outsmart one that had ruled for millennia? The answer was simple, though the Krellians couldn't see it. Humans weren't fighting a war. They were solving a puzzle, and every human was finding their own piece of the solution. 8 billion minds working on the same problem from different angles, each finding solutions the others would never have imagined. As the 3rd day ended, the impossible had happened. The Krellian Empire, which had never lost more than 100 ships in any war, had lost over 1,000. They still had more ships, more weapons, more resources. But they were losing something more important: their certainty that they would win. 3 weeks into the war, the Krellian Supreme Commander stood in his war room, surrounded by the greatest military minds of his species. They had conquered galaxies. They had destroyed civilizations. But now, they were afraid. "Explain it to me again," the Supreme Commander demanded, his 6 eyes focusing on his intelligence chief. "How are we losing to humans?" The intelligence chief pulled up a holographic display showing the war's progress. "Sir, we're not fighting a military. We're fighting a species. Every human is a soldier now. Their children are breaking our codes. Their elderly are piloting suicide runs. Their criminals are leading guerrilla attacks. Their artists are creating weapons we don't understand." Another general added, "Yesterday we captured what we thought was a supply ship. It was full of comedians who had volunteered for a suicide mission. They spent 3 hours telling jokes before the ship exploded. Our soldiers are having nightmares about humans laughing while they die." The Supreme Commander's crystalline body flickered with frustration. "They should fear death. Every species fears death." "Humans fear it too," the intelligence chief said. "But they fear the death of their species more than their own death. We made a mistake, sir. We threatened their complete extinction. Now every human alive would rather die fighting than live as slaves." On the human side, Admiral Steve Johnson stood before a group of captured Krellian officers. The Krellians had expected torture, interrogation, or execution. Instead, they were in a comfortable room with good food and were being treated well. This confused them more than violence would have. "You want to know how we're winning?" Steve said to them. "Look around this room." He pointed to the guards and workers. "That man over there, Tony, was a baker 2 months ago. He invented a way to turn bread yeast into a biological weapon that only affects Krellian technology. The woman by the door, Jennifer, was a kindergarten teacher. She figured out how to use children's finger paint to jam your sensors." The senior Krellian prisoner spoke up. "This is impossible. These are not warriors." Steve smiled. "That's where you're wrong. Every human is a potential warrior. We just needed the right reason to show it. You gave us that reason when you threatened our children," he continued. "You count soldiers. We count humans. You have a military of maybe 50 million. We have 10 billion humans, and every single one of them is now your enemy. You created the largest army in galactic history, and you did it by threatening to destroy us." The evidence was everywhere. On the colony world of New Australia, a grandmother named Betty White had volunteered for a suicide mission. She was 87 years old and had never fired a weapon in her life. But she flew a ship loaded with explosives into a Krellian command sent her while broadcasting recordings of her grandchildren singing. Her last words, transmitted across human space, were, "I've lived a good life. But my grandchildren deserve to live theirs too." Stories like Betty's spread through human space like wildfire. They became rallying cries. Every human who heard them became more determined to fight. The Krellians had superior technology, but humans had something more powerful: the willingness to sacrifice everything for the next generation. Even human prisoners of war were fighting. Inside Krellian detention facilities, captured humans organized resistance movements. They didn't try to escape. Instead, they studied their captors, learned their weaknesses, and transmitted information back to Earth. Private Jack Russell had been captured in the first week of the war. The Krellians expected him to break under interrogation. Instead, he spent his time teaching other human prisoners how to turn prison equipment into weapons. By week 3, the prisoners had taken control of 3 detention facilities from the inside. How? The Krellian guard commander asked Jack after the humans had taken his facility without killing anyone. "You had no weapons." Jack held up a spoon. "Everything's a weapon if you're creative enough. We turned your food dispensers into stun guns. We made lockpicks from bed springs. We even figured out how to use your own security system against you, by teaching it to recognize us as guards." The Krellian looked at the spoon in horror. "You conquered a military facility with eating utensils? And soap," Jack added. The soap was very important, made the floors slippery in just the right places. But perhaps the most devastating blow to Krellian morale came from the youngest humans. A group of teenagers on Earth, led by Alex Turner, had not only hacked Krellian communications, but had started a psychological warfare campaign that was driving the aliens insane. They created fake Krellian social media accounts and spread rumors among the enemy forces. They sent love letters from non-existent Krellian admirers to lonely soldiers. They even created a fake Krellian game show where contestants won prizes for surrendering to humans. "This is evil," one of Alex's team members, David Parks, said while laughing. "We're defeating an alien empire with memes and catfishing." Alex shrugged. "They wanted to see what humans are capable of. Turns out we're capable of being incredibly annoying." The Krellians tried to adapt their tactics, but humans kept changing faster. When the Krellians started jamming human music, humans switched to using sign language and interpretive dance to communicate. When the Krellians developed defenses against human hacking, teenagers found new ways to break in, using methods inspired by video games. Captain Paul Davis, now commanding a fleet of converted civilian ships, had perfected a tactic he called aggressive confusion. His ships would do completely random things in battle. One ship would fly backward while firing. Another would spin in circles. A third would play dead, then suddenly come to life. "The Krellians are logical," Paul explained to his captains. "They look for patterns in everything. So we give them no patterns. We're not random. We're deliberately chaotic." There's a difference. During the Battle of Proxima Centauri, Paul's fleet of 30 converted ships faced a Krellian armada of 100 warships. By all logic, the humans should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, the battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the Krellians retreating in confusion. One human ship, a converted cruise liner, had flooded its hull with disco lights and mirrors, creating a light show that overloaded Krellian visual sensors. Another ship had released thousands of rubber ducks into space, each one containing a small transmitter that made it appear on sensors as a full-sized ship. A third had simply played the sound of crying babies at a frequency that caused Krellian commanders to become emotionally unstable. "We're not winning through superior firepower," Paul said afterward. "We're winning by being so weird that they don't know how to fight us." The stories of human resistance were spreading beyond Earth's forces. Other species in the galaxy, who had lived in fear of the Krellians for millennia, were starting to take notice. The humans were doing the impossible. They were beating the unbeatable. On the Krellian homeworld, panic was setting in. Reports came, in every hour, of new human tactics, each more bizarre than the last. Humans using trained dolphins in spacesuits as scouts, humans turning black holes into weapons by throwing trash into them at specific angles, Humans teaching their AIs to write poetry that crashed Krellian computers. The Supreme Commander called an emergency meeting of all Krellian leaders. How do we fight an enemy that uses chaos as a weapon? He asked. His Minister of War, who had never lost a battle in 400 years, looked defeated. We don't, sir. We can't predict what they'll do because they don't know what they'll do. Every human seems to be making up their own tactics as they go along. Then we use overwhelming force, the Supreme Commander decided. We'll gather our entire fleet and destroy Earth itself. Cut off the head and the body dies. But even as he gave the order, reports were coming in that made him doubt. Human colonies were becoming self-sufficient. Human ships were being built in hidden locations throughout the galaxy. Humans were spreading like a virus impossible to contain. Worst of all, humans who had been thought dead were returning. The ghost ships that Dr. Kevin Liu had hidden were just the beginning. Humans had been playing dead throughout the galaxy, waiting for a moment like this. Miners who had been listed as lost in asteroid fields. Colonists whose ships had supposedly been destroyed. Even an entire colony that had faked its own destruction 50 years ago. They all came back, armed and ready to fight. Sir, the intelligence chief said quietly, we've received a message from the humans, from their President Carter. The message was simple. You wanted to see what humans are capable of. You're seeing perhaps 1%. Do you really want to see the other 99? The Supreme Commander felt something he had never felt in his 1,000 years of life. Doubt. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were changing the very nature of war itself. And they were enjoying it. The war lasted 43 days. On the morning of day 44, something happened that had never happened in 10,000 years of Krellian history. The Supreme Commander of the Krellian hegemony asked for peace. The request came after the battle of the Krellian homeworld. The humans hadn't invaded. They hadn't destroyed cities or killed civilians. Instead, they had done something far more devastating. They had shown the Krellians that humans could reach them anywhere, at any time. Captain Danny Chen, still commanding, his ancient colony ship, had led a fleet of 500 human vessels in a demonstration above the Krellian capital. The ships had arranged themselves to spell out words in the Krellian language. We could have destroyed you. We chose not to. Choose wisely. Then every human ship had turned on lights, released fireworks, and played music. It was a celebration, not an attack. The message was clear. Humans had won, and they were showing mercy. In the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Lisa Grant stood where Luke Harrison had stood 43 days ago. Luke had been promoted to Earth's military coordinator, and Lisa had taken his place. The same aliens who had watched in silence as the Krellians threatened humanity now looked at her with a mixture of awe and fear. The Krellian delegation entered the chamber. They moved slowly, their crystalline bodies dimmed, their 6 arms hanging, though the Supreme Commander himself had come. Something that hadn't happened in 3,000 years. Humans of Earth, the Supreme Commander began, his voice no longer commanding but tired. We surrender. We accept your terms. We will never threaten your species again. Lisa nodded. We don't want your surrender. We want something else. Chamber grew quiet. Everyone expected the humans to demand tribute, territory, or the destruction of Krellian military forces. Instead, Lisa said something no one expected. We want partners. The galaxy has been ruled by fear for too long. The old way, where ancient species dominate younger ones, where might makes right, where innovation is crushed by tradition. That ends today. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from dozens of species. Humanity offers a new way. We'll share our technology, our ideas, our chaos, with anyone who wants it. Not just the quantum drive. Everything. How we think, how we create, how we turn the impossible into the possible. The Altarian delegate, whose species had been under Krellian control for 2,000 years, spoke up for the first time in centuries. You would share your weapons, your tactics? Lisa smiled. We'll share something better. We'll teach you how to think like humans, how to look at a problem and see not what is, but what could be. how to take any situation, no matter how hopeless, and find a way to win. Over the next year, the galaxy transformed completely. The younger species who had cowered under the boot of ancient empires began to rise. They learned human creativity, human adaptability, human stubbornness. The Altarians, who were natural healers, combined their medical knowledge with human innovation. Within 6 months, they had cured diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. They did it by approaching medicine not as a science but as an art, finding creative solutions that no one had imagined. The Pentari, a species known for their vast libraries and love of knowledge, opened their archives to everyone, but they also learned from humans how to think beyond what was written. They started asking what if instead of just what is. Their scholars began making discoveries that revolutionized galactic science. Captain Paul Davis was put in charge of the new United Species Fleet, a combined military force made up of all species who wanted to join. He stood on the bridge of the USS Unity, a ship built with technology from 15 different species, commanded by a crew that included humans, Altarians, Pentari, and even some Krellians who had chosen to join the New Order. "This is weird," his human helmsman Chris Anderson said. "6 months ago we were trying to kill each other, now we're working together." The Krellian officer standing next to him, who had taken a human name and now went by Bill, replied, Humans have a saying, if you can't beat them, join them. We couldn't beat your chaos, so we decided to learn from it." Paul watched his mixed crew work together. The galaxy learned our most dangerous secret. When humans are threatened, we don't just fight to win. We change the rules of the game itself. The transformation wasn't always smooth. Many older species struggled to understand human thinking. In one memorable incident, a Pentari scholar spent 3 weeks trying to understand why humans had won a battle by using a tactic from a children's game called tag. He finally gave up when a human child explained, "Sometimes the best strategy is no strategy." But gradually, the galaxy adapted. Human chaos mixed with alien order to create something new. The Krellians, humbled but not destroyed, found a new purpose. They became the galaxy's peacekeepers, using their military knowledge not to conquer, but to protect. They had learned that true strength came not from dominating others but from defending them. Dr. Emma Watson, who had revolutionized shield technology during the war, now led a combined research team. Humans, Krellians, Altarians, and dozens of other species worked together, combining their different ways of thinking. "Look at this," she said to her team, showing them their latest invention. Krellian precision, human creativity, Altarian intuition, Pentari knowledge. We made an engine that runs on dark matter and dad jokes. It shouldn't work, but it does. Her Krellian assistant, who had also taken a human name and called himself George, shook his head. "I still don't understand how humor can be a power source." Emma grinned. "That's the beauty of human thinking. We don't always understand it either. We just try things and see what happens." President John Carter, in his final speech before retiring, stood before a gathering of all species on Earth. The planet that the Krellians had threatened to destroy had become the unofficial capital of the new galactic order. "We didn't conquer the galaxy," he said. "We freed it. We showed every species that they don't have to accept the way things have always been. They can imagine something better and make it real." He paused, looking at the mixed crowd of humans and aliens. "The Krellians asked for war. We gave them evolution. We forced the entire galaxy to evolve, to grow, to become something greater than it was." The Krellian Supreme Commander, who had become an unexpected friend to humanity, spoke next. "We ruled through fear for 10 millennia. We thought that made us strong. The humans showed us that we were actually weak, trapped by our own traditions. They freed us from ourselves." He turned to the crowd. "We asked for war. They gave us a mirror. We saw what we had become, and we chose to change. That is humanity's true weapon. They make you see yourself clearly, and then they show you that you can be better." As the ceremony ended, children of all species played together in the gardens. Outside, human children taught alien children how to play hide and seek. Alien children taught human children games from their worlds. They mixed the rules, creating new games that no one had played before. Alex Turner, now 20 and working as Earth's youngest diplomatic attaché, watched the children play. Katie Zhang stood beside him. They had both been teenagers when the war started, hacking Krellian systems from their bedrooms. Now they were helping to build a new galaxy. Did we really win? Katie asked. Or did everyone win? Alex thought about it. Maybe that's what winning really means. Not defeating your enemy, but turning them into your friend. Not destroying the old order, but transforming it into something better. Above them, ships from every species flew together in formation. The USS Liberty, commanded by Lisa Grant, flew, alongside Krellian battleships, Altarian medical vessels, and Pentari research ships. They weren't preparing for war. They were exploring, discovering, creating together. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest secret. When truly threatened, humans don't just fight back. They change everything. They turn enemies into allies, chaos into creativity, the impossible into the inevitable. And in doing so, they had given every species the permission, the knowledge, and the courage to do the same. The age of empires was over. The age of possibilities had begun. And it all started because one species had the audacity to look at the most powerful empire in the galaxy and say, "You want a war? We'll give you something better. We'll give you a future you never imagined." The old order was broken. What replaced? It was messy, chaotic, unpredictable, and beautiful. It was human, and now it was everyone's.